Hola a todos, mi nombre es Sebla González, coordinadora de SANFIC XR, y les queremos dar la bienvenida al panel África Expandido, una perspectiva personal de la escena de la estratosfera XR del continente africano. Este panel es parte de la nueva sección de SANFIC, SANFIC XR, una sección destinada a las nuevas realidades. Este año estrenamos esta primera ventana de exhibición con obras latinoamericanas y chilenas que estará disponible desde el 15 al 18 de agosto en el Centro Cultural Matucana 100, en donde podrán ver diferentes exponentes de realidad virtual y exitosas obras latinoamericanas. África Expandido, el panel que vamos a presenciar el día de hoy, es el primer encuentro entre el metaverso africano y latinoamericano. Un diálogo sobre el presente y el futuro de la escena XR del continente africano. Participando en este panel, tengo la suerte de introducir el día de hoy a Eduardo Cachucho, que es el director creativo de Fak'Ugesi, Festival Africano de Innovación Digital. Eduardo es el consultor de programación, artista y ex-arquitecto. Ha trabajado en innovación digital en el sector creativo por más de una década, local e internacionalmente, creyendo y propulsando siempre las prácticas de creatividad digital para el empoderamiento sustentable de África a lo largo de los países del continente africano. También nos acompaña el día de hoy Antoinette, que es la representante de Electric South. Electric South es una fundación de productoras de XR basadas en Sudáfrica. Ellos producen, comisionan y entregan mentorías y exhiben trabajos a través de una red de artistas a lo largo de África que quieren explorar los universos a través de lo inmersivo, historias interactivas, incluyendo realidad virtual y aumentada y otros medios digitales. Electric South tiene el compromiso de construir espacios inclusivos para creadores de medios inmersivos a lo largo de África. Y hoy tenemos la suerte de contar entre nosotros con un Lilo Diva, una intergaláctica cambio de cuerpo, interdisciplinaria, artista, gender bending de Sudáfrica, que trabaja en el vértice entre la música, el arte, el diseño y la performance. Esta artista queer nos va a hablar un poco sobre su producción y su trabajo, que emerge desde la vanguardia de las estéticas con la tecnología, el arte visuales, la danza, el cine, XR y digital art. Un Lilo acaba de lanzar su visual EP, el cual pueden escuchar a través de diferentes plataformas, que ha recibido más de 1 millón de streams online y que ha sido parte de increíbles y diferentes textos y festivales alrededor del mundo. Su trabajo ha girado internacionalmente en Estados Unidos, Europa y Sudamérica, y ha trabajado con instituciones de renombre internacional como Pro Helvetia, el Goethe Institute, One Beat USA y muchos otros. Antes de comenzar este panel, me gustaría mostrar un poco del trabajo de un Lilo y invitarlos también a ver su más reciente lanzamiento, una obra inmersiva 360, que está disponible a través de todas las plataformas. Me gustaría dejar con ustedes ahora al director del festival Fak'Ugesi, Eduardo Cachucho, para continuar con la conversación. Muchas gracias a todos y esperamos disfruten de este panel.
Thank you, Salva. Yeah, I think it's wonderful to kind of start off the discussion with hearing Mlilo's beautiful voice and that video. I definitely suggest that people go online and see it. And you'll probably be able to link through if you just search Mlilo.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Yo creo que es una maravillosa forma de iniciar esta conversación con esta obra de Mlilo, que usted, con el video, con la voz que ustedes podrán ver en las plataformas cuando busquen Mlilo.
I must also add that then hearing our kind of descriptions in Spanish made me think, wow, it sounds more impressive than I imagine it in English. So I guess also language is an extremely important element. So I think it's wonderful for us to be having this discussion and sharing some of Africa and kind of expanded XR work with the kind of the Americas. I think it's really important that we have more discussions like this in the future.
Bueno, y ahora escuchando lo que acabo de decir en castellano, me parece bastante impresionante y realmente el idioma es una herramienta maravillosa también para expandir toda esta experiencia XR y de abrirnos desde las Américas hacia África y tener este diálogo.
Right, so I think perhaps I'll start with a kind of maybe larger framing of the kind of XR space in Africa at the moment. It is challenging to create work, and I think I'll then kind of hand over to Antoinette to speak a bit from Electric South. Of course, with XR work, it's highly technical and requires quite a lot of equipment to even begin working in this space, and a lot of like pre-existing knowledge to make work. So that does offer extreme challenges in a continent where, of course, the kind of wealth level is lower than in most countries.
Bueno, y quizás comience con una pequeña introducción del universo de XR en África, los desafíos que se presentan, y después pasa la palabra a Antoinette con su experiencia en Electric South. Pero por cierto, aquí tenemos todo un universo de tecnología que se necesita equipos, se necesitan conocimientos previos para poder realizar estos trabajos, y esto en un continente donde obviamente los niveles de bienestar no son los mismos que en otros.
But at the same time, I would also be really strong in mentioning that even with these challenges, we have artists that are creating incredible and challenging work that is challenging gender norms, colonialism, repatriating work, that are really like looking at new ways of being and living in the world.
Pero al mismo tiempo quiero decir que a pesar de todos estos desafíos en África, hay artistas que están realizando trabajos increíbles que desafían temas como el género, el colonialismo y otros.
So I think as an example, Mlilo has incredible work, and I think I remember when Mlilo was telling me that she had gotten the kind of lab for Electric South, and I was like, oh, I'm so happy. We really need, people like you and artists like you that have such incredible work in other spheres to be working in extended reality.
Y un ejemplo es el trabajo que está realizando Mlilo, y con su trabajo realmente increíble. Y recuerdo que comentó que se había ganado un laboratorio en Electric South, y creo que es tremendamente importante que se obtenga la posibilidad de trabajar en estas realidades extendidas.
So I would then kind of hand it over to Antoinette, there's really interesting programs like Electric South. There's another program which I'm also involved in called Digital Lab Africa that are offering opportunities to these artists that have really great ideas, but then don't always have the kind of infrastructural support that is needed. So I think if Antoinette, perhaps you could even discuss the kind of the lab that you had earlier in the year and the kind of artists that you were working with there.
Bueno, y tenemos quisiera después pasar la palabra a Antoinette, que tiene la experiencia de Electric South, pero también existe ese laboratorio que se llama Digital Lab Africa, que ofrece oportunidades a los artistas, pero a menudo hay falta de infraestructura, de apoyo, y quizás Antoinette nos pudieses contar un poco sobre la experiencia de estos laboratorios.
Thank you. And thank you to SANFIC for having Electric South and me here on behalf of the organization. So just to begin, Electric South is a non-profit company in Cape Town, South Africa, and we support a network of artists around the continent who want to explore their personal practice using VR and AR technologies. And we host a lab every year, the New Dimensions Lab, which we've managed to do for 5 years now. And it brings together, it's a Pan-African lab. Artists come together in residence for a week, and they get to talk together, think together, hear from experts in the field, and incubate an idea that they can then pitch to us for further funding after the lab. And from the lab, we've had works travel globally, locally. And so I'd like to begin with that.
En primera instancia, muchas gracias a SANFIC por tenerme a mí y a Electric South, que es un proyecto sin fines de lucro en Ciudad del Cabo, en Sudáfrica. Nosotros también estamos trabajando ahí en el ámbito de la realidad virtual, de la realidad aumentada, y tenemos el laboratorio New Dimension ya hace 5 años, que es un proyecto panafricano, donde juntamos artistas en una semana de residencias, donde se incuban ideas, donde se realiza un pitch y después se distribuye tanto local como internacionalmente.
And, we've seen that over the years there's been, artists will often apply from kind of the usual nodes where already the ecosystem is quite strong. So there'll be artists from Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa for sure. This year we hosted an artist from Uganda, also from Mozambique, and also from Ethiopia, which was wonderful. Umlilo was one of the artists who was part of the lab. We managed to do a hybrid lab. So we had, for the first time, a hybrid offering. So in person, the lab iteration, and then also so the same talks and kind of conversations online, which was great. And some really great and very urgent voices. So certainly Umlilo brings, to the lab, all of what they're working on. We would have loved to, and I'm so glad to have seen your 360 video today. So I have a little one of these. I also have a headset, but just for ease of reference, it was great to be able to just put my phone in that. And what a beautiful, beautiful song. We have such strong artists. We have one of the artists who's actually part of another festival, Mutek, Nola Peter from Uganda, who, artists come to us and are often very, very established and working quite isolated sometimes. And it's such a joy to bring people together, because it's often the first time that they have conversations with others who are actually resonate with what they're trying to do. So, I mean, it's quite a few that I can mention, but I just want to stop there for the translation as well.
Thank you for that. Estamos juntando artistas, por cierto, vienen muchos de países que tienen un ecosistema artístico fuerte, como Nigeria, Kenia, Tanzania, Sudáfrica, pero también gente de Uganda, de Mozambique, tuvimos de Etiopía, y Lilo estuvo ahí. También tuvimos por primera vez un laboratorio híbrido, es decir, combinando eventos presenciales con eventos en línea. Y quiero decir también que realmente estoy feliz entre estas voces urgentes, de haber visto ahora el video 360 de Lilo, que bella canción. Tenemos estos artistas, por ejemplo, uno de Uganda, y artistas importantes que llegan, pero que muchas veces trabajan en forma muy aislada, y en los laboratorios se juntan y llegan a reflexionar sobre sus trabajos con sus colegas, lo que es muy importante.
I think the last thing I say, perhaps before I put it back to you, Eduardo and Milo, is that what we've seen as Electric South is there is so much interest in Africa at the moment around XR, which has already been taking place. I mean, the ecosystem is already well established. There are nodes and many individuals and organizations working in the space and trying to support the space. Now, what we've seen as Electric South is that there are these kind of international corporations who are looking to figure out what's happening in Africa. We worry about, what's behind all of this interest, but it does mean that there are resources available, and that resources are beginning to kind of channel into the country. That's my daughter knocking at the door. Please excuse me for 1 second. So that's just one point that I wanted to raise.
El último punto que quisiera mencionar es así claramente Electric South ha demostrado que en África existe un interés en XR. Hay un ecosistema establecido que está funcionando. Hay individuos que están trabajando con los conocimientos técnicos necesarios, organizaciones. Hay organizaciones internacionales también que ahora están viendo qué está ocurriendo en África. Lo que sí seguramente sería interesante es ver qué intereses están detrás de este interés de las corporaciones, pero de todas maneras se puede decir que hay recursos para proyectos. Y con eso entregaría la palabra de vuelta a Eduardo.
Maybe I'll continue then to kind of introduce Lilo as a segue through what Antoinette was saying. I think, yes, there is such interest at the moment in Africa, and I think that this is probably mirrored in the Americas. This is also a possible really interesting connection point where Africa and the Americas could be working together to try and maybe align some of this interest to get collaborative work going. But I think that maybe to kind of hand over to Lilo, I think it would also be interesting to know, because I know there is like quite a lot of international attention on your work, and you've also been traveling quite a lot internationally recently. So maybe if you could also kind of give some idea of that, the kind of international appetite and real like need for your work also.
Bueno, yo creo que pasaría después la palabra Lilo. Por cierto, hay un interés en XR en África, y eso de alguna manera se ve reflejado también en las Américas, y eso podría ser un punto de partida interesante para una cooperación, para alinear fuerzas y realizar también quizás trabajos colaborativos entre África y las Américas. Y un Lilo, has tenido bastante atención internacional últimamente y has estado viajando, si hay una especie de apetito internacional por tus trabajos, y quizás pudieses hablarnos un poco sobre esta idea de esta internacionalización.
Thank you. I just want to thank SANFIC for having me in this conversation. It's really an honor to be a part of this. I feel such like a new artist in this, area. So I was a bit nervous even talking about my work within this. But I've been very lucky, I guess, one of few artists in South Africa that has been able to transcend beyond, my country borders. And I think that just kind of happened because of the internet, and because from the beginning of creating as a musician, I was always very drawn to the visual medium, and a lot of my work kind of comes out in that way as well. And I think that also attracted a lot of, well, not a lot, but international kind of attention, maybe because of also the topics that I was dealing with are kind of very varied, from politics to gender, sexuality. So I feel really lucky, and to have a bit of a network of artists all around the world that I have connected with. And recently I've been able to be part of a residency with Provincia in Switzerland, which has also opened me up to so many amazing possibilities of collaboration with other artists who are part of the diaspora in other countries. And I think also residencies like Electric South kind of spearheaded the motivation for myself to kind of go further than where I was when I kind of started at the beginning of the year.
Bueno, en primera instancia quiero dar las gracias a SANFIC. Es un honor estar acá como artista nuevo. Estoy, de hecho, un poco nervioso para hablar. Creo que he tenido la suerte de trascender como artista las fronteras de mi país, que no les funciona a muchos. Yo creo que tiene que ver, por cierto, con la plataforma, es decir, el Internet. Yo en mi trabajo creativo siempre he sido muy visual, eso también ayuda. Yo creo que también para llamar la atención internacionalmente están los tópicos, está el tema de lo político, del género. También existe una red de artistas. Tenido la posibilidad de realizar una residencia con Helvetia, y ahí he tenido la maravillosa posibilidad de encontrarme con otros artistas y colaborar a nivel internacional. Y por cierto, también la residencia de Electric South ha sido muy importante y creo que me ha motivado a ir más allá de lo que he alcanzado hasta ahora.
And I just wanted to say that, like, for me, when I started, I'm self-taught in everything that I've done in music and art. So the idea of community has become hugely important in the work that I do, because not only has it opened up the possibilities to kind of do more, but it's to kind of connect the stories that we have across the world that kind of bind us. And I've been one of the lucky artists to be able to travel to countries like Brazil and America and parts of Europe and some parts of Africa and connect with those artists. And it's become a huge part of my practice, because I come from a background of kind of being isolated. And even at this moment, I still feel kind of a bit isolated when I'm working. So it's so important to me to expand to those networks and to connect with other artists who are creating maybe similar work or are looking at similar topics, because I feel like that kind of brings the exposure of what we do as artists to a larger audience and creates a middle ground for the conversations that we can have across continents.
Desde el inicio de mi trabajo siempre he mirado hacia el sur y eso en mi música, en el arte, siempre la idea de la comunidad a jugar un rol muy importante, no solo para hacer más individualmente, sino también conectar las distintas historias que están en las distintas partes del mundo. Y yo he tenido la suerte de poder viajar a Brasil, a las Américas, a Europa y conectarme con otros y expandir y también de trabajar más tópicos y alcanzar una mucho mayor exposición para estos relatos.
I'll hand over to Eduardo.
Sure, yeah. A lot of what you're saying connects, and I think that's also part of where this discussion came from. Was in fact I had met Selva in France on a program from that IFAS had run with an XR focus in Paris. And very quickly we kind of connected because we understood there was an alignment of our agenda. And I think for me, that's why also I thought this chat was really interesting. Also almost an experiment to challenge the boundary of who we could bring together to make people understand also that this space is open and it is quite radical in the context of Africa. Like we are creating real spaces where new imaginaries and new ideas can emerge.
Bueno, yo creo que la idea del conectar es muy importante. Con Selva nos encontramos en Francia, en un encuentro con un enfoque de XR en París. Y ahí el tema si podemos como alinear ideas relacionadas con el género. Y nosotros también nos preguntamos en una instancia como esta aquí, ¿a quién se podría juntar para demostrar que este espacio en África que ya se ha abierto y que de hecho es bastante radical en sus planteamientos?
So I think, and I mean, I think that's why I think it's also wonderful that Antoinette has her daughter here, because we are, we're also humans at the end of the day. So these kind of connections between people are so important. And this work is important, this kind of person-to-person connection. And I think, Africa is an extremely large continent, as the Americas are also. So there are huge kind of challenges across that. But I think it's not by chance also that a lot of these programs in XR are Pan-African, because, we've got to kind of group our resources together and find ways to work together to share the challenges that we have across our countries, even though sometimes they might be varying majorly. We can still learn from people who are slightly ahead of us or slightly below. We can kind of, bring each other to the same level faster if we work together.
Bueno, Antoinette está ahí con su hija, que me parece maravilloso porque todos somos humanos. Y tan importante también son las conexiones entre nosotros, de persona a persona. África y las Américas son continentes muy grandes y, por cierto, una gran parte de los proyectos XR en África son panafricanos, porque tenemos que juntarnos para juntar recursos también entre varios países y juntar también gente que es más o menos avanzada para que todos suban de nivel lo más rápido posible.
I'm not sure if here, maybe I saw Salva nodding quite strongly. If Salva, if you'd like to come in, perhaps on from the kind of sides of the Americas, and this possibility to share knowledge, I think is important. It's something that came out quite strongly in this XR event in Paris, was that there seemed to be an extreme alignment between the experiences of organizations from the Americas and from the African continent. So I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
Selva, no sé si tú quieres agregar algo. Claramente en los encuentros, como por ejemplo el encuentro de XR en París, hemos visto que intentos de alinear ideas entre las Américas y África, y no sé si quieres comentar algo.
Of course, like for me, it's a natural development that we reach each other and we start communicating. I think XR is not just a medium but a democratization of technologies. We are accessing different platforms, different dispositives, different tools that may allow not just the hegemonic cultures, not just the hegemonic bodies to speak, by giving us the tools to create our own environments, to create our own perspectives, to showcase, like in the case of an artist as complete as Lilo, a whole different universe. Then you are allowing queer, female, marginalized communities representations to be able to occupy a space that wasn't there before.
Sí, para mí es un desarrollo natural, y XR es para mí, al final de cuentas, la democratización de la tecnología. Es una multiplicidad de plataformas, de herramientas que nos permiten presentar contenidos fuera de lo hegemónico, de dar cuenta de nuestras perspectivas, de nuestros universos de queer, de mujeres, etc.
I think it's incredibly important to discuss the possibilities that this technology revolution has given us, especially for unrepresented parts of our community, because exactly right now we are in the verge of a struggle. We have the most established mediums and the most established cultures struggling with the appearance of these new mediums, the appearance of these different other cultures. And it's important to generate spaces of discussion like this, where we are able to know the work of others and at the same time connect with other creators. I myself, as a trans woman from Latin America and brown trans woman immigrant in Europe, I see the work of Lilo and immediately captivates, not only from a technology perspective that's wonderful and beautifully created, but also from a space of resonance, politic resonance.
Sí, aquí creo que es muy, muy importante lo que tenemos de nuevas posibilidades a través de esta revolución tecnológica ahora, y justamente ahora las culturas dominantes o hegemónicas están de alguna manera luchando con esas apariencias o apariciones de estos nuevos espacios para nosotros, creadores, y además seres políticos. Y yo que no soy solo artista, sino también soy inmigrante de Latinoamérica en Europa, y cuando veo la obra maravillosa de Lilo, no es solo sino que aquí también hay una resonancia política muy fuerte y muy importante.
I think what I would like to ask Lilo, now that I have the chance, how has it feel the repercussions of your work as an artist? Because I think that once you start realizing the power that this new media has, it's also at the same time very exciting and very mind-blowing, the possibilities that it open for you.
Quisiera preguntarle a un Lilo cuáles son las repercusiones de tu trabajo, porque una vez que uno descubre el poder de los medios, ahí se abre todo un gran abanico de posibilidades.
Thank you, Silva. I feel like, you know, as I was saying earlier, how important it was to be part of Electric South, for example, because I had no idea who other African queer artists are in this kind of, or doing this kind of work all over the continent, all over the world. And I got to have a one-on-one with a queer artist based in Europe, in Germany, called Sarah Vogel, who was also part of the mentors at Electric South. And it was so amazing to be in a room talking about our experiences as queer people from completely different worlds. And that also showed me the possibility, because they also were able to say to me, like, start simple and just continue with what you were doing. So it was like that encouragement that I've kind of never had before, because I've always been in the corner having big ideas, but not being able to really execute them with the limitations of the technology or the funding that I always kind of had around me.
Ha sido muy importante ser parte de Electric South. Si antes no tenía idea que había otros artistas queer de otros países, de otros continentes, y yo tuve, por ejemplo, una experiencia de un intercambio con uno a uno con un artista queer de Alemania, que fue uno de los mentores también en Electric South, y fue maravilloso poder hablar, intercambiar experiencias de personas queer de dos mundos distintos, y ahí se me dijo también que comenzara mi trabajo con cosas simples, y de ahí seguí desarrollando el trabajo en vez de, como era en mi caso, tener grandes ideas, pero sin los recursos para poder ejecutarlos.
And I think like that world and that portal opening up is one of the biggest kind of things that an artist can have, because for me, it's been very important to occupy spaces that haven't been tainted by our government systems or the kind of capitalist system that we kind of rely on. So it's been an environment that's kind of free of all of that, where it's still new and ideas are still flowing and people want to create this kind of camaraderie. Was really huge for me, to a point where I've now included it in the work that I'm doing. I'm doing a residency now with One Beat, with over 40 artists from all over the world, every single continent. And we're using AI to make music, we're using AI to make art, we're using VR. And it's so amazing to all be engaged in this topic and then go back to our little core of the world and kind of pay it forward and create communities around that within our own spaces.
Y ha sido realmente este portal que se abre ahí, es realmente lo máximo que se puede esperar en un mundo creativo, y además se abre ahí un espacio fuera de los espacios dominados por los gobiernos, por un sistema económico, capitalista, donde fluyen las ideas libremente. Estoy, por ejemplo, participando en un proyecto proyecto donde se juntan 40 artistas que utilizan la inteligencia artificial para hacer música, para hacer arte, y de ahí cada uno vuelve a su país y se sigue creando en comunidad.
So I'll just end off like what I was saying with, I didn't know as an artist that, you know, it was important for my community to see artists like me, just as I wanted to see artists like me growing up. So it's kind of become part and parcel of what I do, to be able to kind of create this community, sorry, in South Africa. And a bunch of friends and I have decided to start a kind of new media festival in December that kind of includes music, dance, poetry, and we're giving like an opportunity to 26 artists who are at different points in their career to kind of join us on this journey. And we want XR to be a huge part of what we're going to be doing with this festival, and just kind of growing it so that every year we have double the amount of people working in this area, even with the most minimal resources. So that's been an exciting kind of evolution of what I do as an artist, to kind of focus more on the larger scheme of things, instead of maybe just a small, minute part of it, of working as a independent artist.
Lo último que quisiera comentar es ahí se está desarrollando una comunidad y quiero participar en este desarrollo para que haya más artistas que logren a conseguir el espacio que yo he encontrado, y nosotros estamos organizando un festival de arte con un componente importante de XR, donde juntamos 26 artistas para que nos acompañen en este viaje de distintas disciplinas artísticas y también de distintas fases de desarrollo de su carrera. Y queremos doblar cada año la cantidad de gente que participa, y eso es una evolución para nosotros muy importante, a pesar de los recursos mínimos, y quiero cada vez más pensar en proyectos que realmente tengan efectos a gran escala.
Thank you, Milo. I think it was beautiful to hear the progression and the beautiful evolution that your work has been creating in the XR sphere. I would like to ask Antoinette about the same, like the history and the progression and a little bit of the evolution that you think the laboratory will have. Because from our perspective, from a South American scene, laboratories have been the one allowing that these technologies spread into the minds that are urged to use them, because the formal education, it's very hard to access for a lot of creatives. So laboratories end up filling that void, especially from territories that are more outside of the center. How do you feel that the laboratory has created when did it started, how it is right now, and how do you feel like it could be end up evolving?
Bueno, realmente ha sido muy interesante y maravilloso este avance que se ha dado en el trabajo de Milo. Ahora, yo creo que quisiera preguntarle a Antoinette cómo ve ella la historia y también la evolución de los laboratorios. Claramente para Latinoamérica o las Américas, los laboratorios han jugado un rol muy importante en la distribución de estas tecnologías entre la gente, porque en la educación formal normalmente no aparecen tanto. Entonces, además, el laboratorio es también uno de estos espacios no controlados de alguna manera, mucho más libre. Entonces, Antoinette, ¿cómo se ha dado inicio a ese desarrollo y cómo ves la educación y el futuro?
Well, I will say that it's for Electric South, one of the key things that we are committed to keep doing is to have our New Dimensions lab. We would, of course, like to grow our offerings so that there's more than one lab a year. There's real value in experimenting and having the protected time to experiment and not tying that to a hard and fast outcome. So the lab is indulgent sometimes. You know, some would say, oh, 8 days just to like, you know, hang out with each other and, you know, have conversations and listen to interesting talks. But there's so much value in having that protected time. Because so much happens outside of the conference room, you know, all of the connections, all of the future thinking about what to do together. So we definitely want to keep doing it. Definitely will keep doing it. Please watch the space.
Bueno, para Electric South, un hito clave es el laboratorio New Dimensions y quisiéramos en algún momento tener más de uno en el año porque es tan importante poder experimentar y tener tiempo para hacerlo. Si uno podía decir, wow, 8 días que uno conversa con la gente, escucha charlas, etcétera, pero es un tiempo protegido donde ocurren tantas cosas, donde la gente habla sobre las posibilidades de cooperaciones, del desarrollo de sus trabajos y definitivamente vamos a seguir organizando esto, así que véanlo en las plataformas y visítenos.
And one thing, if I may, which I would love to see, is I would love to see a convening, a Pan-African and even transnational, cross-continental, South-South convening of Black and Brown people in the space, to have, you know, panel discussions, breakout rooms, like that's what I'm excited about. Like, how could we organize, you know, South, and I say Latin America, Africa. How can we bring? How can we find a space and time and the funding to talk and to map out where we each are and how we move together? Because I think that has happened a little bit in Africa through Immersive Africa, which is kind of the hashtag for the African ecosystem in the space. But what, like, how can we work together in a way, you know, because that would be incredible, that kind of convening. So it's an idea, and maybe I put it to Eduardo since he's so good to bring people together. So yeah, so it would be wonderful.
Una idea más, así que yo creo que sería maravilloso poder organizar no solo un encuentro panafricano de la gente, sino también a nivel sur-sur, así una especie de conferencia o de encuentro de la gente en Latinoamérica y en África, con paneles de discusión, cómo encontrar el tiempo, los recursos para después poder juntos conversar sobre cómo avanzar. Hay una experiencia inmersiva en África, o sea, Immersive Africa es el hashtag que de alguna manera refleja el ecosistema existente en África, pero sería maravilloso poder hacer esto con Latinoamérica y quizás Eduardo, que es tan bueno para juntar gente, se podría encargar de esto.
Yeah, so maybe I'll hop from there and then say, I think in a way that this discussion is partly on on that way. I mean, I know Salva and I have talked about it, and I kind of initially vaguely talked about it with you, Antoinette. So hopefully it's kind of discussions like this that will lead to that. And one thing I also wanted to add was that, you know, like the selection that New Dimensions does, the selection of the actual artist is so careful and deliberate. And I think that with this interest in Africa and Latin America in spaces like XR, we should take this chance also to take that narrative and make sure that it's not hijacked by, you know, super famous people that are just doing really like a kind of mediocre work on a kind of mass media level. We really have a chance here to make sure that the stories that need to be heard and that don't always get heard get the space that they need to get, and also the funding.
Bueno, yo creo que de alguna manera ese proyecto está andando en conversaciones como la que estamos teniendo en ese momento. Así, estos debates que tenemos acá son los que llevan adelante ese tipo de proyectos, y también, por ejemplo, la muy cuidadosa selección en laboratorios como New Dimension aporta eso. Y creo que lo que tanto en África como en Latinoamérica, en el ámbito del XR, tenemos que cuidar que no haya gente famosa y al final de cuentas mediocre que coopte el XR utilizando los medios masivos, y nosotros tenemos que asegurar que realmente sean las historias que realmente valen la pena ser contadas, que tengan eco y que haya recursos para contarlas.
I would like to echo what Eduardo was just saying. Working in SANFIC XR, it's our first edition, it was immediate for me the need to start what you are actually talking about, Antoinette, to start to create a space that for now it's us having this conversation, but hopefully in the next edition, it would mean that we could have artists coming to Santiago and exposing their work to the Chilean community. Now we have a 4-day exhibition. We have 8 different VR projects on a beautiful room in one of the biggest cultural centers of Santiago, showcasing Latin American and Chilean virtual reality experiences. But it would be lovely that next year it would be African and Chilean projects, even some projects that may be created in this meantime within creatives, and then it could be showcased at the end like a result of the laboratory in our context. I think that more than discussions, we need examples. Examples between creatives, because we are in a need for exploration, in a need for concrete ways of generating dialogue. And as I can see in the work of Mililo, as I can see in the work of artists from the Americas, like Claudio Expandido, it's a non-binary Peruvian artist that's creating also their work around performance, gender performativity, their own culture. And it's just a one person work, you know. Obviously, it spreads to collaborators, but at the same time, like these mediums allows creatives to work with such freedom that it could be lovely to see the result of a dialogue like this, creating more and more examples on how we could continue producing. Because I think what new media, especially virtual reality and immersive mediums need, it's production. We need content that would fight, as Eduardo was saying, the mass media, content that would fight the hegemonic cultures are taking over these spaces, content that would give more resources for the new users of this medium to step out of their comfort zone and embrace new and interesting perspectives.
Bueno, yo creo que lo que estamos haciendo en SANFIC XR aquí en esa primera versión es lo mismo que dice Antoinette, hay que crear un espacio y ahora tenemos este espacio y este espacio por ahora somos nosotros. Sería interesante, por cierto, que en la próxima edición artistas puedan llegar a Santiago de Chile y ahora nosotros estamos exhibiendo algunos proyectos de XR de virtualidad real de Chile y de Latinoamérica, pero el 2023, por ejemplo, sería maravilloso tener experiencias tanto africanas como latinoamericanas y quizás trabajos que en el intertanto se realicen en laboratorios y que se puedan después mostrar. Lo que necesitamos son más que debates, creo yo, son ejemplos concretos de creaciones, de creadores. Necesitamos explorar el medio, tenemos que reforzar el diálogo y tenemos gente como Lilo, una artista peruana muy importante. Hay varios performers a nivel de gender. Lo que tenemos que hacer definitivamente es seguir produciendo, tenemos que crear contenido justamente como fue mencionado para no dejarnos cooptar por grandes producciones que funcionan en el espacio de los medios masivos y necesitamos más recursos para poder salir de la zona de confort y seguir avanzando.
In the panel we had a few days ago with the XR Latin American community, there were two topics that were like really on top of everything. On one hand, we were talking about how we can give and share these technologies with our communities that have very difficult or even non-access to these kind of technologies. But from the other hand, it was like how we can create safe and professional context for non-hegemonic bodies and necessary voices that come from our territories. The original population from Latin America, from Ayala, are in need for mediums that will allow them to create that translation of their cosmovision. And that is a very beautiful approach to immersive technologies and especially to virtual reality. Examples like Violeta Ayala and the COA Collective of Bolivia, a group of feminist women, all from Quechua or Aymara descendants, that are working together to bring their imaginary world into VR. It's the kind of examples that we need to showcase the whole African scene. So you know that what we are doing, it resonates a lot, but it's also a beautiful example of how you can use these technologies with very few elements that are very accessible at the same time to transform the way people are thinking about new media. New media doesn't always have to be around this cyborg futurism idea. It can also showcase the ancient visions of our original population. I'm sorry, Sven.
En el evento que hemos realizado con la comunidad aquí latinoamericana ha habido básicamente dos tópicos principales. Y uno es cómo podemos compartir la tecnología, hacerla llegar a gente que tiene poco acceso. Y lo otro, cómo podemos crear contenido para estos cuerpos no hegemónicos. Entonces, cómo podemos utilizar estos medios y traducir al final las cosmovisiones de distintos integrantes de estas comunidades en arte. Y hay ejemplos como por ejemplo Violeta Ayala, hay un colectivo COA, Aymara, y que transforman su imaginario ancestral en arte. Entonces ahí podemos resonar y ahí está el uso de la tecnología que puede ser realmente transformador, y no se trata necesariamente de crear cyborgs, sino también puede utilizar esta tecnología para dar cuenta de visiones muy antiguas de esos pueblos.
I think what happened when I met Eduardo in Paris, as he already told you, it was that our queer identities immediately found each other in a space where there is no many of us, but at the same time in a space that is really important to get. You immediately start thinking about how you can extrapolate this to where you're coming from, how you can take it back and say, hey, I met this person that is talking the same kind of politics that I am, inside the same kind of context as the XR metaverse, and how we can go back to our organizations and showcase something that wasn't there before. I come from the cinema film world, and that's the most mainstream one inside the audiovisual context. And the industry is mainly driven by a class, gender, race situation that makes it very hard for bodies like ours to enter and develop and succeed. Not saying we don't exist, but it's complicated. But when you start looking at what new media has been for queer, female, non-representative, non-hegemonic genders and performativities, you see that the media has always been a place for resistance. I come from a continent that was widely, and I think we share that experience, politically confrontational during the last century. And video art, for example, was a way that artists had to resist and communicate with others. And from that is where the whole Chilean new media scene started to rise.
El encuentro con Eduardo en este espacio en París fue ese encuentro de identidades queer, de los cuales no había muchos, pero igual así fue un espacio tremendamente importante. Y ahí estaba la pregunta, ¿cómo se puede extrapolar este espacio y este encuentro a casa? Este encuentro con una persona que tiene unas ideas políticas en el mismo contexto de XR, y es cómo se puede, a partir de esta experiencia, mostrar algo nuevo cuando uno vuelve a casa. Y bueno, nosotros venimos del mundo audiovisual, y ahí esta industria tradicionalmente está muy marcada por lo hegemónico, por lo tradicional, y es muy complicado para cuerpos como los nuestros, toda la parte no hegemónica, encontrar el camino a abrirse paso. No es imposible, pero no es nada fácil. Pero al mismo tiempo los medios, este tipo de medios, siempre han sido también el lugar de la resistencia, y Latinoamérica, que ha pasado el siglo pasado por un siglo muy confrontacional. Claramente a través del videoarte ahí hay muestras en Chile, por ejemplo, justamente expresiones de esta resistencia que nacen justamente.
I think as a medium, the XR, it's so political. As we were talking before, it's very democratic, but at the same time, it is very, it's almost intangible, so we can create it and transform it. It's fluid. I think that's what I like a lot about the work of Mililo, that it's very fluid within interdisciplines, from plasticity to music, to programming and developing inside PR, that it requires a necessity for understand fluidity in a beautiful way. I congratulate you for your work because I think it's very important, especially for a racialized body perspective, to see a person of color inside the XR community. I remember the first time I saw the work of Jacob E. Satterwhite, a North American from the United States artist. But going back, like the example that you have in Electric South, Antoinette, I think it's something that should be replicated inside our continent. So we may find also spaces to develop, so artists like Umlilo could work on that. What are your encounters, and how have you had any encounters with South American creators? I had the chance actually to meet with Ingrid, is one of the directors of Electric South at Cinema Market, and we talked a little bit about that, but I'd love to know your perspective on the South American XR scene.
Wait a second.
Sorry.
El XR siempre lo he visto como un medio absolutamente político y tremendamente democrático, que permite crear, transformar y que es algo siempre fluido, y yo creo que eso se muestra también en el trabajo de Umlilo, esa fluidez, esa interdisciplinariedad, es la música, es la plasticidad, es la programación, y hay que entender esta fluidez, y realmente te quiero felicitar, Umlilo, porque es tan importante este trabajo, y también es importante que una persona de color sea tan importante en ese mundo. En XR hay un artista que yo he visto que se llama Satterwhite, que también está en esa dirección. En relación a Electric South, Antoinette, creo que sería muy importante replicar tu experiencia en Latinoamérica, de crear espacios para poder, o deberíamos trabajar en esa creación de espacios, y quisiera saber un poco si te has encontrado con gente de Sudamérica. Cuéntanos un poco.
Thank you for that question. We were so lucky to have Violetta speak at a workshop that we did earlier this year with 18 artists, fashion practitioners working in sustainability together with creative technologists. It was funded by the British Council, called the Design Futures Lab, and Violetta came to talk to the artists during, there was an online sustainability workshop and then a 3-day in-person, but she was online. It was just incredible to see the property she's bought in, I don't want to say the metaverse, I don't know if that's but the virtual property she's bought, and just to hear her talk about Indigenous cultural sustainability, and that she's working to, really kind of remain rooted in her, in her culture, and like make sure that the metaverse represents who she is as much as anywhere else, right? So I thought that was really powerful, because it's important, like if we don't populate these new virtual worlds with our iconography, with our indigenous knowledge, and our ourselves in a way, and ourselves and our ancestral heritage, then no one else is going to do it. So I'm going to stop there And then the one other thing I will say is, I don't know if this is okay for you, Sven. Can I say one other thing? The one other thing I wanted to say is we hosted the first ever free 360 festival in Africa online during the pandemic. That was our offering because we couldn't do anything, but we thought we had to do something. So this is what we devised. And we programmed 4 Feet Blind Date. And it was, I mean, from Argentina, the director, I just had to look up director Maria Belén Poncio. I don't know if I've got that correct, but we dealt with the producer Ezekiel and Nardon, and it was just incredible, you know, incredible to see work from Latin America, to see differently abled bodies on screen and in 360 as well. And what an incredible, what an incredible narrative. So we were very privileged to be able to share that work from your continent. It's great.
Nosotros tuvimos a Violeta en un taller con 18 artistas sobre la sostenibilidad en el mundo del diseño. Se llama Design Lab, un taller en parte presencial, en parte online, y Violeta estuvo en la parte en línea, y ella fue increíble ver ese mueble virtual que se creó, y fue maravilloso escuchar cómo esta cultura indígena se transforma en estos proyectos basados en lo sostenible. Y era muy importante también ver cómo ella era enraizada en su cultura, y nosotros debemos popular todo este nuevo espacio de estos nuevos medios, de nuestros conocimientos, de estos sonidos ancestrales, de todo este gran haber que tenemos ahí. Y nosotros organizamos la primera versión del Festival 360, y ahí tuvimos la experiencia increíble de tener ahí a María Belén Runcio de Argentina, que con su narrativa, que realmente fue un privilegio tenerla ahí.
It's great to hear that there was a collaboration, especially within Violeta and your context. I think, if not, she's the most important XR creative from our territory, not just because of how awarded and recognized her work has been all over the world, but because of what you're saying, how she is able to translate something so beautiful, ancient, and important and relevant into our XR metaverse.
Es maravilloso saber que ha existido esa cooperación entre Violeta y tu contexto especialmente, no solo porque ella quizás sea el representante más importante de Latinoamérica, que muestra sus obras en todo el mundo, sino también y especialmente porque traduce algo tan ancestral y trascendental en esta realidad XR.
I think because we have some few minutes left from the panel, but what I really would like to open the mic is for you to dream and imagine what would be a nice future for the development of the XR metaverse. If I could start by you, Eduardo, I would love to also know what are your aspirations with Fak'Ugesi, and what are if you can tell us a little bit about the future, it would be lovely.
Y ahora que quedan pocos minutos, quisiera que tomen el micrófono para soñar y imaginarse un futuro bello de XR, y me gustaría comenzar con Eduardo y para ver cómo ves el futuro de Fak'Ugesi.
Thanks. Yeah, and maybe we can go a bit without for this year from now on, which really is kind of about dreaming of the future. And I think for me, something that has kind of been coming up in this discussion, a bit of what you're talking about, Selva, in terms of like politics even, and the kind of role that XR can have in this space, and us, even the way we had initially met, for me, it was like, it's almost like we were part of two non-aligned families, firstly being queer, secondly being, you know, living outside of the center, outside of, let's say, the kind of the hegemony, and finding each other so quickly. And I think that doesn't happen by chance. Those energy levels are there and they exist. And for me, ideally, I mean, I was writing in the chat a bit earlier, wow, electric South America would be amazing. And probably electric South Asia also would be amazing. And then a electric South where they all meet would ideally be what I've been kind of already visioning in my mind quite excitedly. So yeah, more talking, more overlapping, more collaborating across regions that have so much to share with each other.
Soñar el futuro. Bueno, hemos hablado sobre el tema de las políticas de tener espacio. Fue increíble ese encuentro con Selva, donde tienes, sentía casi como si fuéramos miembros de dos familias no alineadas, que por un lado lo del queer y también lo de vivir fuera del centro hegemónico, y lo importante fue ahí encontrarnos que al final eso no es casualidad, y además se genera ahí un nivel de energía increíble, y eso se podía quizás transformar en el sueño de tener un Electric South Latinoamérica, quizás después un Electric South en Asia y un Electric South sur-sur, y eso realmente sería una idea fascinante, y con más cooperación, producción de obras en ese trabajo en conjunto.
Antoinette, if we can continue with you.
Well, I will say, I think, you know, I've heard Electric South so much this evening. I think there needs to be more organizations who are championing creating space for artists on the continent. So like Umlilo's soon to come artists convening, hopefully with a performance element for people to enjoy. So I feel like capacitating organizations who are like-minded and who are about the same thing. So like Fak'Ugesi and the Digital Lab Africa, I guess not only in South Africa, I'm thinking of South Africa now. And then the other thing is continued support from partners who trust us to know what we need as Africans. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Bueno, por un lado he escuchado mucho pero no puede ser solo nuestra organización, necesitamos mucho más organizaciones para artistas que permiten que presenten sus obras. Yo creo que es importante capacitar a organizaciones para que realicen ese tipo de eventos como Fak'Ugesi, como Digital Lab, solo como ejemplos sudafricanos, pero obviamente hay más. Y creo que también sería muy importante encontrar el apoyo de aliados que piensan como nosotros.
And Milo, if you could continue these beautiful ideas.
I definitely, sorry, I echo Eduardo and Antoinette's kind of sentiments. I was thinking back to when the internet kind of became a thing. There was this hope that it was going to be this untouchable utopia. that would not reflect, you know, our real physical lives. And I feel like a lot of the internet has become a reflection of our kind of normal everyday lives. And what I really hope in this space is that we have a chance to kind of rewrite history in a way and like create a collective manifesto of how we want this world to kind of run and be. And I think the more inclusive we can be and the bridges that we can build between corporations and people on the ground and artists, and if we're all in the same room, kind of creating this world, co-creating this world, I think it could be a really beautiful and amazing thing.
Yo estoy bastante de acuerdo totalmente de acuerdo con lo que dijeron Antoinette y Eduardo. Y aparte de esto, el Internet, cuando nació, de alguna manera, nació como una utopía de quizás transformarse en el mundo que realmente se quería, pero al final de cuentas se demuestra que básicamente refleja nuestras vidas tal como las estamos viviendo. Y quizás con esta realidad nueva, con este espacio XR, tenemos la posibilidad de reescribir la historia, de escribir un manifiesto inclusivo que sea un puente donde todos juntos trabajemos y desarrollemos contenidos para este mundo distinto.
Thank you, the three of you, for participating in today's panel. It has been amazing to generate this symbiosis between our territories and our production. I congratulate you all for what you're doing. It's very inspiring to see your work and to even dream about the repercussions that it may have inside our territories, that as we have been noticing during the whole panel, it resonates a lot from one part to another. Hopefully these kind of conversations may concrete into beautiful things, and during next year's SANFIC XR, we may find ways of generating more and more projects and ways of connecting.
Muchísimas gracias por haber participado en este espacio, y espero que para SANFIC en el próximo año podamos desarrollar muchas más formas para conectarnos y para producir.
Me gustaría dejarle a todos los invitados a este último día que tenemos de la exposición de SANFIC XR. Esta conversación va a quedar almacenada en las redes sociales de Storyboard Media y de SANFIC Industria. Y les invitamos también a acercarse a toda la programación y los proyectos que estamos desarrollando, los diferentes laboratorios, las diferentes secciones de la versión de SANFIC Industria híbrida en la ciudad de Santiago de Chile y online. Thank you again, guys, for participating in this lovely planet. It was a pleasure to see your work and knowing more about where you are developing inside your metaverse. On behalf of SANFIC and SANFIC Industry and SANFIC XR, I leave the doors open to all of you to generate more and more resonances, collaborations in the near future. We are at your disposition. Just send us any kind of signal. We will interpret it.
Bueno, muchas gracias nuevamente por habernos dado la posibilidad de ver su trabajo maravilloso, y nosotros como SANFIC Industry y como SANFIC XR queremos resonar esto, queremos seguir ampliando esto, así que mándenos cosas, nosotros lo vamos a recibir, y espero que se hagan cada vez más colaboraciones.
Well, see you in the next time. Thank you all. Have a nice day. Muchas gracias a todos.